Brenda and I finally got around to visiting Charleston. It's been on our list for quite a while, but we just haven't had a chance to get there. It's kind of an interesting area and an interesting place to visit. The map here shows that the historical district is at the very tip of the peninsula, and because there's so much written about Fort Sumter and the start of the Civil War by bombing it, that's on the map also. The surrounding area is well developed, and even Boeing just recently located an aircraft production plant nearby. The waterfront area is bordered by a seawall 17 feet above the water as its top, and it's a large park that used to be a munitions and gunnery place during the Civil War. Most of the guns are still there, but the park is just beautiful and covered with live oak trees. That type of tree grows more broad than it does high, and apparently it got trimmed a little but not too badly damaged during Hugo's with its 150-mile-an-hour winds. Way out in the distance, about 7-8 miles away, you can see Fort Sumter. Telephoto lens brings it close. The South loves its monuments, and there are many, especially celebrating the fact that they are the first to succeed from the Union and that they fired the first shots at Fort Sumter. The North got its revenge by blockading the harbor and raining shells on the city for 500 straight days without occupying it. Did a lot of damage. But I understand that Rhett Butler is able to get his ships in and out on his various trips in between visits to Scarlet over in Atlanta. That tower is St. Michael's, an Anglican church that was nearly destroyed but rebuilt. There's a picture later in the show of it as it looks now. We always take the horse and buggy tours. We get a guided tour. Somebody who knows what's going on would drive us all through the area without having to worry about traffic. And this one was a really great show. We saw a lot of the old buildings and got their history. Most of the homes have interesting stories. The strange shape of them, narrow on the street and long porches along the back, resulted, we're told, from a tax on footage of frontage. Proves that if you want something less of a thing, you would tax it. We also saw the house that a dot-com millionaire bought for $250,000 and put $5 million in it to complete it, bring it up to date, and it's been for sale for several years. The next owner probably will get it for a lot less. It was fun walking through some of the old cemeteries. Back then, people put their whole life history on their tombstones, and it made interesting reading. I was really surprised to see someone I knew well, very well. General Guest's tomb was located right next to where Brenda was standing. He was the subject of a long, detailed term paper I wrote my last year studying history in college. General Guest was one of Washington's officers on the Battle of Long Island, and he deserves our thanks. It's a short, interesting story. Washington had placed his troops along the Brooklyn Heights with the river as the eastern flank and left the western flank toward Long Island, totally hanging, exposed with no help at all. General Howe recognized this, and although he attacked slowly into the face of our protected emplacements, he swung 400 or 500 Hessian troops around to the east. They came charging up over the hill, shooting at the Americans, and if Guest had not done what he did, they could have easily rolled up the whole American line and perhaps even ended the revolution right at that point. General Guest was in charge of the Maryland Volunteers at that point, and he immediately was able to rally 200 or 300 of the Maryland Volunteers who fixed their bayonets, only having single-shot muskets, and charged headlong into the attacking larger force of Hessians. Unfortunately, only about 30 or 40 of them survived, General Guest not being one of them. But that very brave act, stopped the Hessians long enough for the American troops to retreat across a small river and set up a further defense. Later on that night, they escaped over into Manhattan, so the war was not lost, although General Guest was. Walking, we came to the Charleston City Market, a long building, several blocks long. Apparently it was a slave market at one time, and now it's all crafts and arts and the kind of things you usually see when you take a day and head out with your wife to wander through town. We had a nice lunch at Bubba Gump's. Kind of surprised to see the association with the Forrest Gump movie. In fact, Tom Hanks' jacket and shirt were there in a glass case for us to see. In fact, Bubba Gump's was the only thing we saw that wasn't related in some way to the Revolutionary War or the Civil War, but it was a nice place to have lunch. When we left the city, we went by the shipping area where they had the Hundley Museum. I was anxious to see this because I remember reading in one of Clive Cussler's books about the discovery of the Hundley submarine. He searched for it for 10 years. The first day out, they tied off what they thought was a sunken buoy and used that as a search place every single summer. When they finally gave up after 10 years, the diver went down, unhooked the chain where they had their buoy located, and the diver saw a glass port. He didn't know what to do about it, so he got up, called on his phone. They brought out some other tools, blew off the sand, and sure enough, for 10 years they had been anchored to the Hundley. After 100 years of missing, it was found. It's famous because it's the first sub ever to sink a ship in wartime. It was dangerous. 3 times the sub left dock, twice in training and once in war. Both times it left the dock in training, it sunk with 8 crew members dead, and kept coming back for more. In fact, Huntley commanded the second time, and he lost his life. The third time they went out, they sunk on a blockading ship, and somehow backing off from that explosion, they sunk and lay on the bottom until Cussler's dive crew found them in 1995. That was our last museum. We got in the car and drove the 3 hours back to Huntersville. We really enjoy these different villages down in the south with all their history. If you like history, there's an awful lot of it around here because these cities have been here a long time. Goodbye.